From Wana Brands, welcome to Enhance Your Life. I'm your host, Jonathan Small, and each week I talk to people from all sorts of professions and backgrounds about how cannabis has enhanced their lives and how this healing plant can enrich your life too. Hey everybody, welcome to the Enhance Your Life podcast. My name is John Small and I am your host. I am delighted to bring you our guest today, Jeannette Horton, who is the executive director of NuLeaf Project, which is based in Portland, Oregon. And NuLeaf Project's mission is to build intergenerational wealth via the legal cannabis industry for communities disproportionately harmed by cannabis criminalization. And NLP's programs are designed to increase success outcomes for people of color in the cannabis industry, either as business owners or as professionals. NuLeaf provides funding for cannabis businesses, skill building and mentoring for entrepreneurs and professionals, and national and state equity policy development and advocacy. And NuLeaf recently teamed with Wana Brands to support the passage of the state legislature's recently introduced Cannabis Equity Act. And the partnership will also support the development of resources to help promote NuLeaf's minority business accelerator program. So lots there. Jeannette Horton, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So how do you, I did a very long-winded explanation of what NuLeaf does, but it's probably better to hear it from you. What does NuLeaf do?
Thank you for asking. We'll go back to the mission. So our mission is to build generational wealth for the communities most harmed by cannabis prohibition. And there are two reports by the ACLU that take data from across the country and they look county by county. It's very comprehensive and show us pretty definitively that Black folks in the U.S. and then to a certain extent, the report says brown, but a mix of Latinx and Indigenous folks in the U.S. have been the most arrested, disproportionately harmed by cannabis prohibition. Black people have been arrested in the U.S. at rates of almost 4 to 1. And it's not because it's for cannabis possession. Largely, this is for simple possession. And health studies show over and over, there's more than one that you could reference that show that people of all races and ethnicities consume pretty much the same. So if we're consuming the same, there's a targeted arrest of certain groups. And now that we've changed our mind as society and decided that cannabis is legal, NuLeaf Project says there's an opportunity through this growing legal industry to rebuild wealth for the communities that were most harmed due to arrest and incarceration.
And how are you going to go about doing that? I know there's a different tiered approach or pronged approach. Talk to us a little bit about how you're going to reverse some of these wrongs of the past.
Great question. So we really do it in two ways. The first way is we practically fund cannabis businesses owned by Black, Indigenous, and Latinx folks, priority, but we also fund really undercapitalized entrepreneurs as a whole. Our priority and our majority are those Black, Indigenous, and Latinx entrepreneurs. And we fund their small cannabis businesses because there's a big gap in terms of funding, in terms of the funding available, especially the Black and Indigenous groups to fund their businesses. And there's a lot of data and studies that show that capital, that funding for your business is the number one determinant of business success. That's what it boils down to. The more funding you have, the more you're able to weather bad storms or bad decisions or mistakes, whether something like, a coronavirus that causes you to pivot and change everything you're doing and figure out how to survive. And if you've got capital, then that helps you survive. And our Black, Indigenous, Latinx businesses do not. So what we do practically is say, how can we close that capital gap for these businesses and help them get a chance at being successful cannabis business owners?
And how do you identify the entrepreneurs and the businesses that you fund and want to be involved with?
For the most part, they come to us. We like to advertise we're available. And if someone comes to us seeking support, we figure out how to help. We, don't necessarily identify because we don't turn anyone away. We say, how can we help you? And it may not be funding. You may not be ready for funding, but there are classes we can connect you with on the commercialization of food, for example. If you want to launch an edibles business, there are mentors we can connect you with if you're looking to understand how VC funding works and you want to ask some questions. So it depends on what the entrepreneur needs. Everyone who comes looking for help, we figure out how can we support that entrepreneur.
And you
work with Wana to support the passage of the state legislature's Cannabis Equity Act. Talk to us a little bit about what that act is and why you guys are behind it.
Yeah, that's the other thing we do to help build generational wealth through the cannabis industry. There's a growing standard as states legalize recreational cannabis to make that recognition that we need to repair those harms of the war on drugs, and that we can do that through this booming, growing cannabis industry by investing cannabis taxes into those communities most harmed. There are economic opportunities to build wealth through cannabis business ownership. There's also opportunities for people to get loans and open restaurants or open tech companies. There's an opportunity for cannabis taxes to be those investments in those communities who are so economically fragile. So the Oregon Cannabis Equity Act is in that vein. It is a cannabis equity bill that invests cannabis taxes into Black, Indigenous, and Latinx communities for education, for job placement, for small business support, for home ownership and land ownership.
And how close do you think you are to getting that passed?
It's a long session, I've been told. But we have, good news is a lot of support, both from community, from cannabis community, from community orgs that support Black, Indigenous, and Latinx groups, and from representatives and senators. So we've got a lot of support within the Oregon legislature, and things are looking bright ahead of our first Judiciary Committee hearing on March 11th. But it's a long road, they tell us, to get a bill passed.
So I'd love to know a little bit more about your background. How did you get involved in this line of work? What is your experience in the past with cannabis and with social equity? Can you tell us a little bit about your origin story?
Sure. I came to cannabis from Coca-Cola. I'd worked at big companies my career. I'd been marketing and communications, and really was offered the chance to be CMO of a cannabis tech company. I wanted to run my own shop. And in marketing, and cannabis just seems like a really exciting opportunity in a fast growing industry. And then I got to Kansas. I didn't have a background in equity. Let's start with that. My degree, it was very focused and centered on race politics and gender politics, but my work had been in marketing and communications. And I went to a cannabis tech company called Akerna to lead their marketing and communications, and then saw the industry with my own eyes, and it was less diverse than corporate America. And corporate America is not very diverse.
You thought it was less diverse, even less diverse.
Oh, for sure. It was absolutely less diverse than corporate America. And I was shocked because of the nexus of cannabis in the lives of Black people. I can speak from my own experience. I can speak for having been arrested for a cannabis-related charge. I can speak for having seen more members of my family, my immediate family, than I'd like to count, arrested. Over-policing is real. And the legalization of cannabis just felt like this nexus moment to do the right thing, to build a better industry, and seeing it not diverse at its outset was a big concern. And so I started working with Minority Cannabis Business Association. I joined that board its first founding year. And it's become kind of a leading national equity organization in cannabis. And we folks who joined that, some all had our different experiences and perspectives, but really we're trying to build national policy for what's best practice with cannabis equity. And then I left MCBA, quite frankly, because I had a baby, but in time decided that, national policy setting was important, but because states are really doing the work locally, the licenses are local and the state equity bills are local, that if I was going to make a difference, it was going to be in a state. And I live in Oregon, and so I started this nonprofit in Oregon to help fund cannabis businesses where the biggest gap is. Minority business owners will tell you in cannabis that the problem is funding. So I'm really trying to solve their problem and help create more diversity in cannabis. And then at the same time, because I live in Oregon, help steward this equity bill. Just because of the passion, because of my own personal experience, it just it won't let me go, is how I think of it.
Well, you mentioned you were arrested. So can you share what you mean? What happened?
I was with someone else who he had cannabis in his possession. We had cannabis in the possession in the car. But that's not why we were pulled over. We were pulled over for a moving violation. We were pulled over because you could argue we were driving while Black. I mean, the data says that people of color, Black people in particular, get pulled over more. So we got pulled over for for a non-moving violation. We got pulled over for a seatbelt violation. So
Oh,
what they
wow.
call a non-moving violation. But then at that point, because of the smell of cannabis, things evolved into both me and the driver getting arrested. And that was that. And then I got taken to jail and I got strip searched
Oh, wow.
and yeah.
So that really was a personal, you really saw it firsthand what the real problem is here.
I did and I didn't. I always count my blessings. I got blessed that I was able to get the charge removed on a technicality, get the arrest expunged. And most people don't have that blessing or luck. So that's why we do the work like the equity bill that Wana's partnered to help us push forward, because it also includes a free automatic expungement for people who don't have access to the resources to get a record expunged so that they can move forward with my life. I was blessed that I haven't had to walk around with that on my record for the last 15, 20 years, but lots of people have. Expungement is hard and it's expensive. And so the bill also for 28,000 or so Oregonians will provide free automatic expungement to remove these cannabis records that people are carrying around for nothing, for minor possession charges, which is what the situation was when I was arrested.
It's dispiriting to hear that you saw the corporate landscape and saw such inequity and lack of representation when you saw it. Of course, it's not surprising, but it is dispiriting because I think a lot of us like to think of cannabis as being like this very open, liberal industry and plant, but it isn't really the case. Why do you think it is so underrepresented? People of color are so underrepresented in the business of cannabis.
People are underrepresented in the business of cannabis because of economics. So you can't get to traditional bank loan in cannabis. Traditional bank loans over-index on lending to white-owned firms, but at least there's an avenue to go sit down and perhaps get a traditional loan outside of cannabis. In cannabis, the way people build their businesses primarily is through their personal wealth or their network. So you have to fund your business yourself or get a loan from friends and family or a connection to a rich uncle who thinks it might be a good way to spend his retirement income. And because of the inequities in personal wealth, African Americans have less than 10% of the wealth of whites and declining and getting worse with each passing decade, the recent census data has told us. So you just don't have the funds to float a business. It's just not there. And so that's the pure economics of it. Those with the finances, the personal wealth to start a cannabis business do so, and those who don't do not. They are barred from being able to do that because they don't have the capital, which is why this is what we focus on. Now, there are things you can do in legislation to also reduce the cost of ownership. And so it isn't just about getting money to minority-owned businesses. It's also about saying, how do we create a regulatory structure via licensing so that the cost of ownership is low, as low as possible, and the hurdles are as low as possible.
Can you tell me some success stories from NuLeaf? I'm sure you've had some individual, wins there, and I'd love to hear, stories of people that you have trained or invested in who have really succeeded or showing so much promise in the industry.
Yeah, I'm really excited about so many of our entrepreneurs. We've got an entrepreneur right now who just, it's called The Joint Juice Bar, Joynt. If anyone is in Oregon and wants to get some CBD juice. She just opened her brick and mortar store called The Joint, and she's got CBD like drink mixer line under a company called Royalty Spirits. But the fact that through COVID, so we helped fund her pivot. When COVID happened and bars shut down, Royalty Spirits, the owner's name is Chauncey King, and her business Royalty Spirits was primarily sold through the bar channel. So obviously that's going to be a big impact on her business. And she knew she could try to move to liquor stores, and obviously liquor store sales started to boom. So she wanted to get her products in liquor stores, but that cost money. She had to produce a different type of packaging so that it would work for the liquor store outlet. So you need money to pivot. It was the year of pivots, but only businesses with extra cash can pivot. So we were able to provide her a grant that helped fund her pivot to being able to launch a different type of packaged product in liquor stores, then fund her way to by being able to pivot, by not having her business go under, by being able to get these accretive sales or these new sales in a new channel. So as bars come back online, she's now added this whole new products line, and she's been able to fund the launch of a brick and mortar store, which is a success story for her, but also for the city of Portland that funds these grants, that you've got in the time of COVID, someone opening a brick and mortar store and employing new people and kind of bringing life back where we've seen so much detraction. So anyway, that would be one I would share, is Royalty Spirits and the Joint Juice Bar.
That sounds great. I want to go to Oregon and experience that. Do you have plans to expand outside of Oregon?
Yeah, we do actually. We have begun that expansion already, and we are funding businesses. We're looking to fund businesses in Colorado, and we've executed a loan for business in Texas. So we continue to expand and are interested in looking at companies everywhere and supporting companies all across the U.S.
And where does the money come from to help fund these ventures? You work with companies like Wana and the corporate world and the cannabis world. Are there individual donors? Can people donate money to NuLeaf? How does it work?
Yeah, people can donate money to NuLeaf, and they do. We get, the diversity problem in cannabis isn't from a lack of people caring about the issue. There's a lot of passion from, cannabis started with activists. There's a lot of good-hearted, passionate activists, and we get a lot of individual donations, and we have a lot of companies like Wana who contribute to a cause like this. And then we have non-cannabis brands who donate. Dr. Bronner's, Scott's Miracle Grow. We have companies outside of cannabis starting to think about this issue and think about how big this industry is becoming and want to make a good impact. And then we get city funds. So a portion of city cannabis taxes are set aside to make these reparative justice investments, if you will. And some of the money goes to recidivism programs and goes to, or reducing recidivism, those kinds of programs. And some of the money goes to job placement and skill building. And then some of the money goes to investing in cannabis businesses. So those taxes, and the city of Portland voters are the ones who said, yes, we want to do this, and voted as part of a voter amendment. We want to invest what we're paying at the register in cannabis taxes to repairing harm.
So the show is called Enhance Your Life, and we talk to our guests about how cannabis has enhanced their own life. Can you tell me how cannabis has enhanced your life? Have you been a consumer of cannabis most of your life? I mean, we understand how it's enhanced your life, certainly from a business standpoint, but just in terms of your interests, what about from a health standpoint?
Yeah. So from a health standpoint, I took a big break from cannabis after that kind of a bit of a trauma. You take a hard left, and I took a long time off and came back to cannabis only after I was diagnosed with Graves' disease. It's a thyroid condition. And eventually I had my thyroid taken out, which was the worst. I don't recommend it.
I had half my thyroid taken out, and I didn't like that either. Horrible.
I wish I know people who still have half. They have not, in my opinion, the medical community, scientists, whoever, pharmaceutical companies, have not figured out how to copy the real deal in terms of thyroid hormone. I know people heard of people, I don't know them personally, who get pig hormone instead because the synthetics just don't work. Right. I found that to be true for myself. I am not the person I was since the day they took my thyroid out, except cannabis brings me to some level of normalcy. So it took me a long time of some just painful, it's a difficult disease. It was difficult for me to get my head wrapped around my symptoms, and I flew to see experts and specialists and finally found that cannabis was the best thing.
So when you say it wasn't the same, you just felt your moods were different, and because the thyroid really affects your mood and your balance and your equilibrium. Yeah,
it impacts your brain, which for me was just like, God, not my brain. Like, I mean, it's not like worse than anything, but it's your ability to kind of compute. For me, it was my mood. So it's definitely about like depression and anxiety, intense anxiety, and ADHD, and just all kinds of craziness. I was like, who am I? Have I lost my mind? I was not myself. And I really thought I'd lost my mind. And then finally stumbled across, just in trying to figure this out, a book by this expert who explained, no, this is your lack of your thyroid. This is the fact that this is, they haven't figured out how to treat this when they take your thyroid out. And then he got me on a bunch of drugs, this expert out of Texas, and I still didn't feel like myself. And then I, thank God, smoked some cannabis, and it was like in an instant, my brain, the fog lifted. Anyone who has Graves' disease or loses their thyroid and talks about it, most people talk about it as a fog. The fog lifted, and it's like my brain was firing again. It was like, oh my God, I can compute, I can think, I can remember a series of numbers longer than 2. It's an incredible feeling. And then I will look forward to the day when we can have clinical testing and I can get, it's a little cumbersome trying to stay medicated at the right pace and with the right strains. We just haven't figured out the medicine part of it yet. So when we can get some clinical trials and really figure out how to treat people with the plant, that'll be a good day. Right now I'm self-medicating and I'm very thankful that I live in a state where that's legal.
What's your preferred form of consumption? Tinctures, smoking?
So I guess my preference is smoking. That's always my preference. I just feel like you get the whole flower in a way that, yeah. But so that's my preference, but it's not always convenient. Sometimes a little high dose tincture under the tongue is the best way to keep it moving.
And you find you can function and actually function a lot better when you have those, even if it's a high dose.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about counting the doses, but what I know is that medicine for cannabis, if you are medicating with cannabis, there may be people who are uncomfortable with your dose, quotation marks, of THC. That's okay. You don't understand this as medicine. And for those with cancer and those with MS and those, with debilitating conditions who understand this as medicine, you got to believe the stories. You got to believe the stories of these kids with epilepsy, because there's still some cannabis bigotry, even among some cannabis advocates, about things like high THC. People may be surprised at my amount of THC, but it's medicine for me, and that's the truth, Ruth.
By the way, cannabis bigotry, I haven't heard that one. That's a great term. So true. Tell us, if people want to find out more about NuLeaf, what should they do?
Please come look us up at NuLeafProject.org.
It's NuLeaf.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you for that. And then you can look up if you're interested, and we'd love to have you, look up the Oregon Cannabis Equity Act by going to OregonCannabisEquity.com.
Well, Jeannette Horton, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Yeah,
thank you for having me.
Enhance Your Life is brought to you by Wana, the #1 infused product in the U.S. Wana's entire process is designed to deliver the same great experience time after time. They have spent years fine-tuning their recipes so that their products are delicious, consistent, and potent. For more information, check out wanawellness.com. That's Wana, W-A-N-A, wellness.com.